Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm Sarah Edens and I'm so glad you chose to join me today. So budgeting is cool here in 2024 thanks to the TikTok trend that started around something called loud budgeting, which I recently made a video on, and I will link to that in the description below if you want to read up on or watch my video on loud budgeting and what it is and what it can do for your life. But as budgeting is now cool, I have a question for you. Do you have a budget? Because a lot of people do not have a budget. And if you don't, that's absolutely fine. You might just be getting started out in your financial life. I've got a whole budget playlist down below. I'll also link to a video that I made about how I set up my budget in Excel and a kind of walkthrough of exactly like how I set my categories up, how I build the spreadsheet. So it's all completely free for you to use if you have Excel. You can use budgeting apps, so just whatever you want to work with. But I want to kind of back up and go to like the 30,000 foot view of how I budget and look at a budgeting strategy that has worked really, really well for me for the past 8 or 9 years now. It's helped me get out of debt. It's helped me have an excellent credit score and build that over time. It's helped me build equity in my home. It's helped me build my investment portfolio. And so it all comes down to having a good strategy. And the strategy I use is called zero-sum budgeting. And so it's something that I learned from this book, which you see me talk about on my channel all the time, The Budget Kit by Judy Lawrence. I'll link to it in the description below. But she basically was teaching this way before it was popular. This book's been out for years. And it basically means that you give every dollar that you make a job. So in any given month, you give every single dollar that comes into your bank account, whether it's from your job, from your spouse or partner's job, rental income, investment, dividends, you name it, like all the money that comes into your household every month, you're going to give it all a job so that by the time every last dollar has been given a job, you come up with a big fat zero. And it doesn't mean that you spend all your money every single month. It just means that you're going to set stuff up like for savings categories and then treat it as if you'd spent it, except it's in your savings account. Or you might have an investment account and it's been like spent into your investments account, if that makes sense. And if this is confusing you and you're feeling lost, then check out my Excel budgeting video too, because I go step by step through all these different categories. But zero-sum budgeting basically works like this. So number one is you want to calculate your income. And so like we talked about a minute ago, just go and really like track down all the money that's coming in every month. This might be really simple if you're paid like bi-monthly or something. Or it might be really complicated if you're an entrepreneur and you're paid by the job or paid by the contract or whatever. It depends on your situation, how much difficulty this is going to be. But just jot down everything that's coming in and get that number. Then the next thing you want to do is categorize all your expenses. So you want to think through what are your fixed expenses that don't, that kind of have to be paid every single month. So we're talking rent or your mortgage, we're talking your utility bills, water, cable, phone bill, all this good stuff. So you want to figure out what your fixed expenses are. Then you want to look through what are your variable expenses. So those are things that might fluctuate a little bit, but you still know you need to get them. So like groceries and gas and household goods and things like that. And then also another kind of variable category is something I like to call fun money. So you're looking at kind of having like an allowance for yourself, your spouse or partner, and come up with like an allowance for yourselves basically so that you have some money that you can spend on whatever makes you happy, whatever brings you joy within that spending category. And then that way you don't feel completely deprived. Because I think one thing about budgeting that comes to mind for a lot of people is like, won't I feel deprived? Like, won't I feel like I don't ever have any money to spend on anything I want to? And that's the key, in my mind anyway, that's the key for making budgeting sustainable is for having that fun money that you just do what you want to with it. And it just makes budgeting a lot more fun. So you get your variable expenses sorted out. And then you have a couple of expenses that, again, I go through in my video about how to do this on the Excel spreadsheet, where you're going to be plugging money into these different categories every month. And so that'll be things like your investments, it'll be things like your emergency savings, your retirement savings or investments, And also a category I like to call reserve savings. That's like for money that you probably will need to, for just unexpected expenses throughout the month. So if you need to have a car repair that comes up and you're like, oh gosh, the car needs a repair, what are we going to do? Then you're like, oh, that's fine. We can pull it from reserve savings. So where you have kind of all these different categories that you just plug money into, if you have a home maintenance account. And the way I do this is I have a whole bunch of different bank accounts, checking accounts, and some savings accounts in my bank. And so they each have like a title. So you have like the home maintenance fund, you have the reserve savings account, and so on and so forth. And then as the money comes in from our paycheck, you just plug those into those things and then they just grow over time, which is really quite nice because that way, if you have a month where you don't have any emergency expenses, you're like, okay, we didn't have any emergency expenses. How nice. We'll just keep that little account growing for a month when maybe we have a lot of expenses. So that's kind of how my system works is, a little bit envelope system online with my bank. And then that zero-sum budgeting concept of just making sure every dollar has a job that it's doing for you and assign a job for each thing. So we've categorized expenses, we've given every dollar a job, and then you just make adjustments as needed. So once you've done this for a couple of months, you'll get really good at it, you get really comfortable with it, and it'll just feel like very easy to do, and then you just tweak it as you need to. So if a bill goes up one month, you just, deal with it, and then if it goes down another month, you're like, okay, that costs less and no problem. Sometimes it's really helpful too, and this is something I've been doing for years, is to have something called a rent and bills account that's specifically for your rent. And so that way you've got, everything for your rent and your fixed bills that you put into one account. And then you just pull all that out from everything every month. And so that way you don't end up with a month where you're like, oh, we accidentally spent the rent money on something else. Whoops. And so that way you don't ever have to worry about doing that. All right, and then the last two things you want to do are really track your spending rigorously. So you want to really start keeping really good track of how much you're making, how much you're spending, and just keep a really good kind of record of everything that's coming in and everything that's going out. And after you've done that for a few months, it's going to get a lot easier because you'll start to see areas that might be running you over that you're like, oh, we have been spending a lot of money on dining out, so maybe we need to reel that back in a little bit. That's blowing our budget, or there might be something else that's blowing your budget. So you just kind of, as you track it, you will see what your areas are, your trouble zones are, and you can kind of work on those as you go. And then the final thing is just to make sure that at month's end, you are all zeroed out. So like we said, you're not spending all your money every month, but every single dollar has been given a job. And the idea is that your money is going out to work for you rather than controlling your life, or unfortunately for some people, like ruining their lives with stress and with arguments with their spouse and so forth. Rather than having that kind of a relationship with money, you just have a relationship where you're very strategic with your money, you're very organized with your money, and then every dollar has a job. And so it just goes out and does its job, and then you know that it's all where it's supposed to be. And then having accounts, particularly like the reserve savings account, honestly was the thing that I think probably made the biggest difference to me in terms of constantly carrying credit card balances versus not, was having that kind of slush fund of money that I would just build up over time. And it's different for an emergency savings account. Like it's for those expenses will come up. Like I said, emergency car repairs, or the dog has to go to the vet or something like that. But that way that you've got like this little account or maybe it's a big account, depending on how much you want to put in it, that you're like, we know we've got money for those emergency expenses that maybe aren't like emergency, like the house burned down and we lost our job, or emergency type things, but are still disruptive to your budget nonetheless and expensive. And so that way they don't cause the stress for you because you've already kind of pre-planned for the things that you just know happen in your life and know you end up having to spend money on. Budgeting is wonderful at any income level. So if you're not making very much money now, this is a great time to start budgeting, because as you make more and more and more money, then you will have more to manage, and then you'll be like, okay, I know exactly where to put all this money to work for me. the temptation as we make more and more money is there is more and more and more to spend on and more things to buy. And sometimes you can get pressured by peers or well-meaning family and friends of like, oh, you've made it, now go buy a big house or go buy a nicer car, or, you know, do these kind of external things that are supposed to somehow show that we've made it or something. And so sometimes we can get really pressured into that and buy into that hype. And so if you have learned how to budget when you don't have that much money, then as you make more and more, managing that becomes a snap, because you're like, okay, we won't buy into lifestyle inflation, we won't buy into lifestyle creep, and we can just deploy all our money like little soldiers off to do what we want them to do, and to have all these like strategic plans going, and we can have our retirement going in the right direction. We can have our investment portfolio going in the right direction. You know, we can be building equity in a home, and it feels really good as you work towards that kind of financial security, knowing you have a 6 months emergency savings account, knowing you have backup if you got laid off from work or your partner got laid off from work. It's just really, it is worth the peace of mind. Budgeting is not glamorous, and it's actually cool this year, which is great with the loud budgeting trend, but it is not glamorous, and typically it's not trendy and it's not cool, but it is such a great, great way to just build peace of mind into your life. It will also, if you get this budgeting strategy in place, pretty much eliminate fights with your spouse or partner around money. And since fights with spouses and partners around money is like up there in the top 10 leading causes of divorce every single year, just look at it as insurance for your relationship or insurance for your marriage to have a budget. And then just sit down and maybe have like once a month where you talk through, or twice a month where you talk through family budget questions. And everybody sits down and looks at, okay, are we all happy with where this is going? Do we need to make some changes? Whatever. But it will really help your relationship out as well. I guarantee you, if you're single, it will really help your peace of mind. It'll help your relationship with money as well. And if you need more help with your relationship with money, by the way, I just finished filming a video on this, which I will link to if it's out by the time this one goes live. But this is a great little book, Happy Money by Ken Honda, who is Japan's best-selling Zen millionaire. So Ken is just absolutely fantastic. And this book is the book you need if you have a lot of stress around money and don't like having to think about money very much. This is the book you need in your life. And it's a nice short little read, and it's very uplifting and encouraging and funny too. So I would really recommend you pick up a copy. I'll link to that in the description. All right, well, that is everything from me today about my zero-sum budgeting approach. It's kind of like a zero-sum budgeting combined with the envelope system. I guess we could call it like the Zenvelope budgeting system. Should we call it that? I think we'll call it that. But that's something that is a strategy that has helped me get out of debt, stay out of debt consistently, and then continue to manage our money as we have grown our income and grown our wealth over time. I can't recommend this strategy highly enough. It works. Well, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again soon in my next video.